You've seen them before, pushing through pavement cracks, spreading across lawns despite every attempt to remove them, growing back the week after you pulled them out. Most people never look twice. But that assumption breaks the moment you trace what these plants were actually used for. Long before antibiotics existed, these exact species were part of battlefield medicine, applied directly to wounds, used when there was nothing else available. And modern pharmacological research has returned to them, not out of nostalgia, but because controlled studies keep confirming biological activity that mirrors those historical uses. Some show measurable antibacterial effects in laboratory testing. Others interact with inflammation pathways in ways that parallel synthetic compounds. What's difficult to ignore is that these same plants are still being pulled from the very ground where they grow most effectively. In this video, you'll discover 10 of them. What you're about to see is not a list of harmless backyard plants. It's a case file. 3 exactly, each examining a different biological system. Pay close attention to number 7, because it grows and disturbs soil you pass every day, yet has been studied across more than a decade of independent pharmacological reviews for inflammatory conditions including arthritis and allergic response. And number 10 has been studied for vascular inflammation and heart disease risk markers, making it one of the most documented wild plants in modern phytochemical science. Stay until the end, because I'm giving you a 14-day challenge to test 3 of these yourself. If you're fascinated by ancient knowledge and modern scientific discoveries delivered to you every week, subscribe now to this channel and click the notification bell, because there is much more ahead. Here are 10 backyard weeds more powerful than antibiotics, and you keep pulling them out. Let's get right into it. Case File 1. Immune and Defense System. Before hospitals, before pharmaceuticals, wounds were managed in the field with whatever grew nearby. Soldiers, healers, and battlefield medics reached for specific plants, not by chance, but through centuries of documented results. Modern medicine spends billions engineering this into antibiotics and anti-inflammatory compounds. Ancient field medicine had already mapped it. The plants in this case file aren't found in pharmacies. They won't appear in clinical brochures. They were pressed directly into open wounds, applied to infected throats, used to calm the body's inflammatory response before that term even existed, and every one of them has since been examined with modern biochemical analysis. What those studies confirmed was almost inconvenient in its clarity. 1. Yarrow, the battlefield healer. Most people walk past it without a second thought. What they're walking past is a plant that functioned as emergency surgery for 2,000 years, literally packed into open wounds to stop soldiers from bleeding to death. Greek tradition credits Achilles himself with using it during the Trojan War. Whether myth or record, the practical reality holds. Armies across multiple continents carried dried yarrow specifically because nothing else available worked faster on open wounds. Here's what makes that history credible. Yarrow contains a compound called achillene that measurably accelerates clot formation. Laboratory studies have confirmed this is a real biochemical effect, not a folk belief passed down through sentiment. But what separates yarrow from almost every other medicinal plant is this. It stops bleeding and promotes tissue repair simultaneously. Most plants do one or the other. Yarrow does both, which is precisely why battlefield medicine valued it above nearly everything else available. 50 independent Native American nations, European military medicine, and traditional Chinese herbalism all converged on identical uses without contact with each other. That level of agreement across unconnected cultures is not coincidence. Crush fresh leaves directly onto a minor cut. Brew the dried herb as tea for fever or inflammation. It grows along roadsides, meadows, and garden edges, almost certainly closer than you think. 2. Plantain. The living bandage, not the banana. The flat, unremarkable plant, with oval-ribbed leaves pressing through every compacted lawn, every gravel path, every sidewalk crack you have ever walked across. You have passed it thousands of times. What you likely never knew is that it contains active chemistry capable of reducing swelling, inhibiting bacteria, and slowing bleeding simultaneously, within minutes of direct skin contact. When European settlers moved across North America, plantain followed so consistently that indigenous nations called it white man's footprint. But here is the part most people never hear. Those same nations adopted it into their own medicine almost immediately. not out of curiosity, but because the results were too fast and too consistent to ignore. That speed is what makes plantain genuinely remarkable. Crush a fresh leaf, press it onto a sting or a bite, and the swelling eases within minutes, not hours. Minutes. That is not placebo. That is aucubin and actioside, two laboratory-confirmed compounds working directly on tissue at a pace that catches people off guard every single time. Unlike most botanical remedies that require preparation, plantain works raw. No brewing, no processing, just the leaf. It onto stings, bites, or minor cuts for immediate relief. Dry the leaves for wound rinsing tea. Infuse in oil for a skin healing salve. It grows in the worst soil. Survives foot traffic. Thrives in sidewalk cracks. It is almost certainly within reach right now. 3. Self-heal. The throat soother. That name sounds like marketing. It isn't. It was earned independently across European and Asian traditions simultaneously, before those cultures had any contact with each other, because the outcomes were consistent enough that no other name made sense. Medieval monasteries cultivated it deliberately. Field medics pressed it into cuts. Herbalists brewed it for infected throats and mouth sores. Not occasionally, consistently enough to sustain its reputation across centuries without interruption. Traditional Chinese medicine, European monastic herbalism, and multiple Native American systems all converged on the same plant for the same uses independently. Wound closure, throat infection, immune support. That kind of cross-cultural agreement doesn't happen by accident. Here is what the science found. Self-heal contains rosmarinic acid, one of the most studied antioxidant compounds in any common plant. Combined with ursolic acid, which carries documented antimicrobial effects, the chemistry explains the breadth of traditional use precisely. But the finding that genuinely surprised researchers came later. Laboratory studies found self-heal extracts show inhibitory effects against herpes, simplex virus, and influenza, specifically by interfering with viral replication before it takes hold. That research is ongoing. The scientific interest behind it is not casual. Brew fresh or dried herb as tea for sore throats and immune support. Crush fresh leaves directly onto minor wounds or inflamed skin. The plant is fully edible, mild, slightly bitter, useful in soups and salads. It grows in lawns and garden edges across the entire northern hemisphere. Small purple flower spikes, easy to miss. Hard to forget once you know what it contains. 4. Stinging nettle. The body's fire alarm. The first thing it does is hurt you. Brush bare skin against the leaves and within seconds a sharp burning sting sets in. Microscopic hollow needles injecting formic acid and histamine directly into the skin. That is not a defense mechanism you forget. What makes nettle genuinely unexpected is what happens when you consume it. The chemistry reverses direction entirely. Nettle never left European medicine. Roman soldiers reportedly flogged their own limbs with it to generate warmth in cold northern climates. That same plant moved through medieval herbalism and into modern clinical research without interruption. An unbroken medicinal record almost no other common weed can match. Here is the detail that stops researchers mid-sentence. A plant that injects histamine on contact appears to reduce histamine response when taken internally. Freeze-dried nettle leaf has been studied in controlled trials for seasonal allergies, with results showing measurable reduction in histamine activity. The biological paradox has no clean explanation yet, but the effect has been reproduced consistently enough to sustain serious scientific interest. The root tells a separate story. Multiple controlled trials found nettle root measurably improves urinary flow in men with prostate enlargement, results researchers describe as clinically meaningful. Blanch the leaves for 30 seconds. The sting disappears completely. Cook exactly like spinach. Nutritionally, nettle delivers iron comparable to red meat, significant calcium, magnesium, and a complete amino acid profile rare in any plant food. It grows in disturbed soil, riverbanks, and garden edges. It announces itself before you see it clearly. Most people walk away before they ever think to look twice. 4 plants. Wound closure. Infection defense. Inflammatory control. Every one of them grows in ground. Most people treat as waste. But what comes next operates on a completely different level. Case file 2 doesn't work on the outside of the body. These plants work quietly inside it, targeting the liver, the lymphatic system, and the metabolic pathways most people never consider until something visibly breaks down. Case File 2. Metabolic and Internal Cleanup System. The body runs a silent maintenance operation every hour of every day, processing waste, clearing metabolic byproducts, keeping organs in chemical balance. Modern medicine has built entire pharmaceutical categories around supporting this system. Traditional medicine found it first, in plants growing wild, requiring nothing, available to anyone willing to look. 4 of them are in this case file. All of them are currently being sprayed with herbicide. 5. Dandelion, the liver helper. Entire product categories exist solely to eliminate this plant. Suburban lawn care has waged a decades-long chemical campaign against it. The plant being systematically exterminated is one of the most nutritionally complete and medicinally documented plants in the temperate world. This was never a weed. It was reclassified as one when aesthetic lawn standards replaced functional land use. Arab physicians in the 10th century documented its medicinal applications in texts that shaped European medicine for generations. Traditional Chinese medicine prescribed it for liver and digestive complaints over 1,000 years ago. Every culture that encountered it reached the same conclusion independently. Here is the mechanism worth understanding. Dandelion root stimulates bile production and improves bile flow, the liver's primary method for moving processed waste out of the body. A sluggish gallbladder is a compromised detox system. Dandelion root addresses that directly. The leaf does something no pharmaceutical diuretic has replicated. It promotes fluid excretion without depleting potassium, because the leaf itself is extraordinarily rich in it, a self-correcting mechanism built into a single plant. Nutritionally, the leaves deliver more beta-carotene than carrots and more calcium than milk by weight. Roast the dried root as a coffee substitute with documented liver-supportive effects. Add young spring leaves to salads. The entire plant is edible at every growth stage. It grows in every lawn, every garden, every pavement crack in the temperate world. The most chemically targeted plant in suburban horticulture is simultaneously the most accessible medicine most people will ever ignore. 6. Sheep sorrel, the sour cleanser. It grows in your worst soil. Thin, depleted, acidic ground where almost nothing else establishes itself. Small arrow-shaped leaves, reddish flower spikes. Most people mistake it for an unremarkable grass. Chew a single leaf, and that assumption ends immediately. A sharp, lemony sourness that signals a plant with chemistry far more complex than its appearance suggests. That flavor is not incidental. It is the first indicator of a biochemical profile that has attracted oncology researchers for decades. Traditional European herbalism used it as a cooling remedy for fever and a reliable source of vitamin C through winter. Consumed, specifically because people understood it restored something the season had taken away. But the research that placed sheep sorrel in cancer biology literature is more specific. Laboratory studies found that compounds in sheep sorrel extract show cytotoxic activity against certain cancer cell lines, meaning they appear to interfere with cancer cell proliferation under controlled conditions. That does not constitute clinical proof, but the consistency across independent studies has generated sustained scientific attention that shows no sign of slowing. It is also one of 4 plants in Essiac, a traditional Ojibwe formula investigated across multiple decades for potential therapeutic effects on serious illness. That formula remains one of the most persistently studied in North American botanical medicine history. Add fresh leaves to salads and soups for genuine nutritional value alongside the tart flavor. Use as a cooling tea for fever. Moderate intake if you have a kidney stone history. Oxalic acid content is real. It grows in the margins. Poor soil. Path edges. The overlooked ground most people walk past without slowing down. That is exactly where it has been building a research profile most people would find genuinely surprising. 7. Cleavers, the body's drainage switch. You have almost certainly worn this plant home without knowing it. Walk through any hedgerow or overgrown garden boundary, and it attaches itself to clothing, pet fur, and skin with a persistence that feels almost deliberate. Most people pull it off and discard it. What they are discarding is one of the only common plants with a documented, specific effect on the lymphatic system, the body's internal drainage network that most people never think about until it visibly fails. Dioscorides documented it specifically, the Greek physician whose work formed the foundation of European medicine for 15 centuries. Medieval herbalists prescribed it for swollen glands and skin conditions linked to poor internal drainage. That is an unbroken medicinal record spanning 2,000 years. Here is why that matters. The lymphatic system carries immune cells, clears metabolic waste, and moves excess fluid out of tissues. When it slows down, the consequences are invisible at first. Persistent puffiness, swollen glands, slow recovery from illness. There is no standard pharmaceutical category for lymphatic stimulation. No drug engineered specifically for this. Traditional herbal medicine developed this application over millennia precisely because nothing else had addressed it. Cleavers remains the primary botanical recommendation in Western herbal practice for lymphatic stagnation, a distinction it holds without serious competition. Cold press fresh stems and leaves through a juicer for the most potent preparation. Dried herb makes a gentler tea. Use it in spring, when the plant is freshest and the body carries the highest accumulation of winter's metabolic tools. Slow down. It grows along hedgerows, fence lines, and woodland edges. It announces itself by attaching to everything nearby. Most people throw it away without a second thought. 8. Creeping Charlie, the internal balancer. It is almost certainly in your lawn right now. Low to the ground, small scalloped leaves releasing a faintly minty smell when crushed. Tiny purple flowers in spring. Lawn care companies listed as a primary herbicide target alongside dandelion. What those companies have no incentive to mention is that this plant carries a published research profile spanning 4 decades across multiple areas of serious biomedical science, including neurological protection, cancer biology, and inflammatory disease. Nicholas Culpeper, the 17th-century herbalist whose work shaped European plant medicine for generations, described it as a general remedy for the whole body. That read as folk exaggeration for 3 centuries. Modern phytochemistry is now producing data that makes it look like accurate observation recorded without the vocabulary to explain the mechanism. Here is what that mechanism involves. Creeping Charlie contains rosmarinic acid, a compound currently under investigation in Alzheimer's research for its potential to inhibit amyloid beta plaque formation, the protein deposit central to the disease's progression. That research is ongoing at serious institutions. The mechanism is considered credible enough to sustain it. The same plant also contains luteolin, studied for anti-cancer activity across multiple cell lines and for its role in reducing neuroinflammation. And apigenin, investigated for anxiety modulation and inflammatory disease. 3 compounds, 4 decades of research. In a weed people spray every April without a second thought. Traditional use centered on respiratory congestion, sinus inflammation, and digestive stimulation, all consistent with what the chemistry now confirms. Brew fresh or dried leaves as tea. Add young leaves to spring salads. Mild, slightly bitter, functional. It spreads in a dense, low mat across lawns and garden beds. Once you know what it contains, it is impossible to look at the same way again. 8 plants, 4 defending the body from the outside, 4 working silently through its internal systems. What comes next is different from both. Case File 3 is not about defense or cleanup. It is about what happens after the damage is already done, when the body needs to rebuild from the inside out. One of these 2 plants contains something researchers did not expect to find in a garden weed, something most people are chronically deficient in. Case File 3. Repair and Restoration System. Defense stops the damage. Cleanup removes the debris. But something still has to rebuild. That process, cellular repair, is the most foundational system in the body, and it depends entirely on raw materials that have to come from somewhere. 2 plants, both currently growing in gardens, both being pulled out before anyone thinks to ask what they actually contain. 9. Chickweed, the skin calmer. It looks too fragile to do anything useful. Thin, sprawling stems, tiny oval leaves, small white star-shaped flowers appearing almost year-round. It covers bare soil quietly and disappears entirely in summer heat. Nothing about its appearance suggests what it actually does. Chickweed has been a staple skin remedy in European folk medicine for centuries, applied specifically to eczema, persistent rashes, insect bites, and minor burns. Not occasionally, consistently enough across generations that the application survived intact into modern botanical practice. European herbalism, traditional Chinese medicine, and North American indigenous practice all independently converged on the same primary use: skin inflammation. That level of cross-cultural agreement on a single application points toward one thing: a biological mechanism reproducible enough to be noticed independently across unconnected cultures. Here is that mechanism. Chickweed contains saponins and phytosterols that actively reduce itching at the tissue level, measurable interference with the inflammatory cascade, responsible for the persistent irritation that defines eczema, hives, and contact dermatitis. Now here is the distinction that matters. Hydrocortisone cream suppresses immune activity broadly, effective short-term, but causing measurable skin thinning with prolonged use. Chickweed reduces inflammation locally without cortisol pathway interference. No skin thinning, no systemic absorption risk. For anyone managing a chronic skin condition, that difference is not minor. Crush fresh leaves directly onto irritated skin for immediate relief. Infuse dried chickweed in carrier oil for 4 to 6 weeks for ongoing use. The fresh plant is edible, mild flavor, functional in salads. It grows in bare soil and garden edges, spreads quietly. Most people pull it without hesitation. The ones who recognize it never do. 10. Purslane. The cell nourisher. Thick, reddish stems. Small, paddle-shaped leaves. Tiny yellow flowers opening briefly in morning light. It sprawls across garden beds through summer, and most gardeners pull it the moment they see it. What they are pulling out is the highest concentration of omega-3 fatty acids ever measured in any land plant. Not among medicinal weeds. Not among leafy greens. Among every land plant ever tested. When that finding first emerged, several independent research teams verified their own results before publishing. The numbers were that unexpected. Ancient Egyptian records document purslane. Greek and Roman physicians prescribed it. Traditional Arabic medicine used it consistently for inflammatory conditions and physical restoration. Every civilization that encountered it reached the same conclusion, independently, across thousands of years. Here is why that matters now. Omega-3 fatty acids are foundational to cardiovascular health, brain function, and chronic inflammation regulation. The underlying driver behind most modern degenerative disease. The populations most deficient in omega-3s are precisely those eating the most processed diets. The solution has been growing in their gardens uninvited the entire time. Purslane also contains melatonin in concentrations higher than almost any plant food tested, and glutathione, the body's master antioxidant, in meaningful amounts. No supplement label, no commercial packaging, no purchase required. Eat it raw in salads. Mild, slightly lemony, satisfying texture. Sauté lightly in olive oil with garlic. Add to soups in the final minutes to preserve nutritional integrity. It grows directly alongside the vegetables people tend carefully. While pulling out the plant beside them that contains nutrients those vegetables cannot match. 10 plants, 3 case files, 1 pattern. This knowledge wasn't lost because it stopped working. It was replaced because it couldn't be packaged and sold. Modern biochemistry didn't discover these plants. It returned to them. And what it found confirmed, with molecular precision, what traditional medicine had been recording through observation for thousands of years. The plants are still there, most within walking distance of where you are right now. The only thing that changed is whether you're looking. Before you go, here is your 14-day challenge. Find 3 plants from this list growing near you. Identify them with certainty. Learn one preparation method for each. Use it once. A tea, a poultice, a fresh addition to a meal. 3 plants. 14 days. 1 preparation each. Not to replace your medicine cabinet. If this video shifted how you see the ground around you, share it with one person who would never expect to find medicine in their lawn. Tell me right now in the comments which case file or weed surprised you the most. I read every one of them. Subscribe to Rooted Heritage and hit the notification bell. The next investigation goes even deeper. See you on the next one. And thank you for watching.